You ever get that feeling? The one where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and it feels like someone drilled holes in your back with their eyes. Yeah, I used to blow that off. Just city paranoia, right? Late nights, tired mind playing tricks. That's what I told myself over and over, but then I saw him. Standing across the street, plain as day, well, plain as night under that flickering sodium street lamp. He wasn't doing anything, not robbing a car, not waiting for a bus, just. My first instinct, stupidly, was to flick the lights off. Like that would somehow make me invisible, erase the last minute. Plunged into darkness, broken only by the thin lines of orange light sneaking through the cheap blinds, I crept back towards the window. My breath hitched in my throat. I needed to see. Was he still there? Or had I imagined it? Maybe the exhaustion was making me hallucinate. God, I hoped I was hallucinating. The next morning felt surreal. Sunlight streamed in, birds were chirping. The world outside looked completely normal, cheerful even. It made last night feel like a bad dream, a figment of an overtired imagination fueled by too much caffeine and bar noise. I almost convinced myself. Almost. But the memory of that silhouette burned into my retinas wouldn't fade. It lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. I tried to rationalize it. It's a city street people walk. Of course there are other footsteps, it's just a coincidence. My mind was desperate to cling to logic, to normalcy, but my gut was screaming. I subtly slowed my pace just a fraction. The footsteps behind me slowed too, maintaining the same distance. My heart hammered. Okay, test it. I stopped abruptly, pretending to check my phone, pulling it out of my pocket with trembling fingers. That walk to the bus stop felt like an eternity. Every step was agony, anticipating something. What was he going to do? Just follow? Would he get closer? Attack? My mind conjured 1,000 horrible possibilities. When the bus finally lumbered into view, sighing to a halt at the curb, I practically leaped on board, shoving my fare card at the reader without even looking at the driver. I scrambled towards the back, sinking into a seat by the window, my chest heaving. Safety, relatively speaking. Work was a blur. I run the dish pit and prep station at a downtown restaurant, noisy, chaotic, usually a good place to lose yourself in the rhythm of work. But not today. Today, every clatter of plates made me jump. Every time the kitchen door swung open, I expected to see him standing there, that tall, dark shape filling the doorway. I kept glancing towards the back alley entrance, the loading dock door. Was he out there, watching, waiting for my shift to end? I decided to change things up. Can't be predictable, right? When my shift finally ended, hours later than usual because I'd stretched out my closing duties, I slipped out the front entrance instead of the back alley. The downtown streets were still busy, crowds spilling out of bars, traffic humming. Safety in numbers, I hoped. I walked quickly, merging into the flow of people, constantly scanning faces, shoulders, gaits. Every tall man was a potential threat. Every lingering gaze felt like suspicion. Panic clawed at my throat. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move faster, breaking into a clumsy jog. Don't run, that's what they always say. Don't show fear. But it was too late for that. Fear was radiating off me in waves. My breath came in ragged gasps, misting in the foggy air. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I didn't look back again. I couldn't bear to see if he was closer, if he was running too. I didn't go straight up to my apartment. Couldn't. I needed a minute or 10. I sank down onto the bottom step of the main staircase in the lobby, burying my face in my shaking hands. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the senseless. Who was this person? Why me? Was it someone I knew? Someone I'd wronged without realizing? A former tenant? A ghost? My thoughts became increasingly frantic, irrational. I thought about the previous tenants of my apartment. I didn't know much about them. After what felt like an hour but was probably only 15 minutes, I forced myself to stand up. My legs were stiff, shaky. Staying in the lobby wasn't helping. I needed to get upstairs, lock my door, pretend I was secure. I climbed the 3 flights slowly, my footsteps echoing eerily in the stairwell. Each landing felt like a checkpoint, each shadow a potential ambush. My own apartment door seemed miles away. When I finally reached it, my hands were slick with sweat again. Key in the lock. I stared at that rose for a long time, frozen in place. A white rose. What did that even mean? Purity, death, some kind of twisted romantic gesture. It felt obscene, sitting there on my fire escape like a calling card from hell. My mind struggled to process the logistics. He was on the street shrouded in fog. Then somehow he navigated the alley, climbed the rickety, noisy fire escape 3 floors up, placed the rose, and disappeared, all without making a sound I could detect. The next few days were a blur of heightened paranoia and exhaustion. I barely slept, existing on stale coffee and pure adrenaline. At work, I was a zombie, jumpy and irritable. Leaving the apartment felt like stepping into enemy territory. Coming home felt like sealing myself in a tomb. I varied my routes religiously, took cabs I couldn't afford, left work at different times, sometimes ridiculously early, sometimes impossibly late. It didn't matter. I finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to do something concrete. Logic, reason. Maybe they couldn't grasp this, but I had to try. I called in sick to work. The thought of the commute, the shift, the journey home was just too much. Instead, I spent the morning online researching home security options. Cameras, stronger locks, motion sensor lights. It all cost money I didn't really have, but what choice was there? My sanity, maybe even my life, felt like it was on the line. The cameras arrived 2 days later. Setting them up was nerve-wracking. Balancing on a chair to mount the one overlooking the street, my hands shook. Every noise from outside made me flinch. Positioning the one in the kitchen window felt even worse. I kept glancing at the fire escape, half expecting to see him standing there, watching me install the device meant to catch him. Once they were connected to the Wi-Fi and linked to my phone, a small measure of control returned. I could watch. I could see. Okay, that's it. Enough. Seeing that footage, seeing him stare into the lens like that, it broke something in me. The fear was still there, thick and choking, but underneath it, something else sparked anger. Cold, hard anger. Who the hell did this guy think he was? Terrorizing me, invading my space, treating my life like his own personal horror movie. No more hiding, no more cowering. Hours crawled by. The silence in the apartment was absolute, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart and the occasional settling groan of the old building. My initial surge of angry resolve began to ebb, replaced by the familiar cold tendrils of dread. Waiting was its own form of torture. My muscles ached from the tension. My eyes burned from staring into the shadows. Doubts crept in. Was this stupid? Was I inviting disaster? The scraping stopped. The doorknob stopped jiggling. Silence descended again, heavier, more menacing than before. My ears strained, trying to pick up any hint of movement in the hallway, footsteps retreating, breathing, anything. There was nothing, just the oppressive weight of the quiet. Minutes stretched into an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted to escape. Did he leave? Did he give up? Was he playing another game, trying to lull me into a false sense of security? Slowly, cautiously, I pushed myself off the couch. My legs protested, stiff and cramped. I picked up the heavy kitchen knife from the coffee table, the cool metal a small, grim comfort in my hand. Bat in one hand, knife in the other, I moved like a shadow through my own apartment, checking the kitchen first. The window was closed, locked. The fire escape outside looked empty in the growing dawn light, the wilted rose still perched on the landing like a forgotten memory. Nothing seemed disturbed. Slowly, deliberately, I unfastened the chain lock. Click. I turned the deadbolt. Clunk. I removed the door jammer I'd wedged underneath. Finally, I turned the knob. The door swung inward silently. The hallway was just as empty as it looked through the peephole. The air felt still, undisturbed. I stepped out cautiously, peering down the stairwell, then towards the other end of the hall. Nothing. Just the usual early morning quiet of the building. It really was over. He'd left. I stared at the wooden bird, my mind struggling to comprehend the implication. He was inside. He was inside. He could have done anything, anything. While I sat there with my stupid bat and knife, thinking I was ready, thinking I was defending the perimeter, he was already within the walls. Maybe standing right behind me in the darkness, watching me wait, listening to my breathing, the sounds at the door, the jiggling knob, the scraping. It wasn't an attempt to get in. It was a diversion, a game. You ever check into a motel and just know something's wrong? Not just that sticky floor smells like old cigarettes kind of wrong, but something deeper. Something stained. That was room 313 at the Sunburst Motel, right off the highway, middle of nowhere. I was driving cross-country, needed a cheap place to crash for the night, figured how bad could it be. Turns out pretty damn bad. My blood ran absolutely cold. Seriously, it felt like someone had dumped ice water down my spine. A kid's drawing, like that, found in this dump. He WATCHES from the closet. My eyes immediately darted across the small, cramped room to the closet door. It was made of that cheap fake wood grain particle board, slightly warped at the bottom, and it was hanging just slightly ajar, maybe an inch or two open. But in that moment, that tiny gap looked like a yawning black abyss. I froze, every muscle in my body locked up tight. Did I really hear that? Or was it just the building settling, old pipes, my own imagination running wild because of that creepy drawing? The scraping sound stopped. Silence descended again, thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic pounding in my own ears and the low hum of the ancient mini-fridge in the corner. I strained my hearing, listening so hard my head started to ache. Nothing. Just the oppressive quiet of a cheap motel room late at night. Maybe. Okay, panic over. Time to try and get some sleep. I tossed the creepy drawing onto the bedside table, face down this time. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I hoped. I still felt weirdly on edge, but chalked it up to the general grime and the adrenaline come down from the closet scare. I decided against wedging the chair under the door handle, felt too much like admitting defeat to my own paranoia. Instead, I just double-checked the lock, making sure the deadbolt was thrown. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake. Not by a noise, not by a nightmare, but by a feeling. The distinct, prickling sensation of being watched. You know that feeling? Like eyes are boring into the back of your head. Except I was lying on my back, staring up at the cracked ceiling texture, barely visible in the gloom. My heart was hammering again, instantly alert. The room was dead silent. No scraping, no trucks, nothing. I'm stopped. My entire universe narrowed down to those two tiny, gleaming points in the darkness of the closet. Eyes, definitely eyes. What the hell was in there? A rat? A stray cat that somehow got trapped? But the way they were watching me, it didn't feel like an animal. It felt intelligent, aware, and completely, utterly still. My mind raced through possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Could it be connected to the drawing, to the he who watches? My body was rigid, paralyzed with fear. My eyes scanned the room frantically, darting into every shadow, every corner, the armchair, under the desk, the space between the bed and the wall. Nothing, no movement, no glinting eyes, but the feeling of being watched hadn't entirely disappeared. It was less intense maybe, but still there, prickling at the edges of my awareness. It felt like whatever was in that closet had just retreated, pulled back into the shadows, waiting. Or maybe it had slipped out while my eyes were closed. Forget the clothes, forget the bag, get out. That was the only thought screaming in my head now. Primal fear took over. I abandoned my half-donned jeans, stumbling slightly, and lunged for the main door. My hand fumbled for the deadbolt, my fingers slick with cold sweat. It felt stiff, resistant. Come on, come on. Behind me, the room felt charged, electric with unseen energy. I didn't dare look back towards the closet. I didn't wait another second. I practically dove into my car, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered for a terrifying moment before catching with a roar that felt like the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. I slammed the gearshift into reverse, not even bothering to check behind me, and peeled out of the parking spot, tires squealing on the damp asphalt. My headlights cut through the darkness as I sped towards the motel exit, glancing frantically in the rearview mirror. I drove until the sky started to lighten in the east, turning from inky black to bruised purple, then finally to a pale, washed-out gray. Dawn. I'd never been so relieved to see daylight in my life. The rising sun didn't exactly burn away the fear, but it took the edge off, made the shadows seem less menacing. I pulled into a brightly lit, busy truck stop, needing coffee, gas, and the reassuring presence of other human beings. The rest of the drive was a blur of caffeine, loud music to keep myself awake, and constantly checking my rearview mirror. Every flicker of shadow in the back seat made my heart leap. I finally made it to my destination, my buddy Dave's place in the city, late that afternoon. Walking up to his clean, bright apartment building felt like stepping into another world, a world away from the grime and dread of the sunburst motel. Dave greeted me with a beer and a barrage of questions about the drive. The next few days at Dave's were a strange mix of forced normalcy and underlying anxiety. I tried to act normal, went out with Dave, saw the sights, but the experience at the motel hung over me like a shroud. I found myself becoming jumpy, overly aware of shadows and quiet spaces. Closets in particular gave me the creeps. I avoided looking directly at them, kept the one in the spare room where Dave had stored my duffel bag firmly shut. I dropped the paper like it was burning hot, stumbled back out of the closet, slamming the door shut so hard the frame rattled. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribcage. Found you. How? It made no sense. Who could have put it there? Dave wouldn't do that. He didn't even know the full story. No one else had been in the apartment besides us. Had it been there the whole time? Did Dave put my bag in there without noticing it? Or had it appeared, manifested somehow? My mind was a whirlwind of terror and frantic, useless thoughts. What did it want? Why me? What did I do besides check into the wrong motel room? Was it the previous occupant, the kid from the drawing? Or something older, something intrinsically part of that place, that room, that patch of land? And how did it follow? Was it in my bag? Did I carry some residue, some invisible spore of its presence with me? The smear on my hand felt like a brand now, even though it was long gone physically. I couldn't bring myself to open that closet door, or any others for that matter. I snatched the note off the floor using a tissue, crumpled it up without looking at it again, and flushed it down the toilet, watching the water swirl until every last trace was gone. Out of sight, maybe slightly less out of mind. When Dave got home, I put on the best performance of my life. Forced smiles, casual conversation, feigned interest in his work stories. But inside, I was screaming. In the morning, I told Dave I had some family stuff come up, had to cut the visit short. He was understanding, though I could tell he thought it was weird, especially given how exhausted I looked. I packed my bag quickly, avoiding the spare room closet as much as possible. As I zipped the duffel shut, I had the sudden, horrible urge to check inside to make sure nothing else had been left for me. A dead bird, another note, more of that reddish smear. I resisted the urge. Sometimes not knowing is better. My hand hovered over the ignition key, ready to slam the car back into drive and get the hell out of there. This was stupid, insanely stupid. Go back, confront it. What was I thinking? I wasn't some ghost hunter, some paranormal investigator. I was just a regular guy who stumbled into something he didn't understand and was now being stalked by it. Running seemed like the only sane option. But the memory of that note, "Found you," echoed in my mind. Running hadn't worked. My breath caught in my throat. 313, not room 7. Room 313, again. It wasn't a coincidence, it wasn't random, this was orchestrated. The clerk, he knew. That wasn't a smile, it was a smirk. He knew what room I needed, maybe even knew why. Closet sealed shut, he'd said. Why? What happened in this room 313? Was it the same entity? Did it have franchises? Or was this something else entirely, drawn to the number, drawn to me? My mind reeled. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet night. I hesitated for a second, hand on the doorknob. Was I really doing this? Was this bravery or utter stupidity? Probably the latter. But the feeling of being hunted, the note. I couldn't live like that, constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified of every shadow, every closet. Maybe facing it, whatever it was the only way to end it. Or maybe it would end me. The tapping, inside the wall, it wasn't stopping. Tap, 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 tap. It was getting faster, more frantic, like something desperate to get out, or desperate to get to me. I snatched my hand away from the cold plaster as if burned. Stumbled back towards the center of the room, heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. My eyes were glued to that patch of wall, expecting it to crack, to splinter, to burst open. Sealed shut. What a joke. You know, everyone gets that creepy feeling sometimes, right? Like you're being watched. Usually you brush it off, tell yourself it's just nerves. But what if you knew? What if you saw the watcher? That's what happened to me. It started on a perfectly normal evening, maybe a month ago. I was up late, working on my laptop in my bedroom. Second floor, right? Important detail. I swear time just stopped. My entire world narrowed down to that window and the horrifying visage plastered against it. How long did I sit there? Seconds, minutes. It felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Was it a reflection of something inside the room? I slowly, carefully scanned my bedroom without moving my head too much. Nothing. Just my messy bed, the overflowing laundry hamper, the bookshelf. My first coherent thought after it vanished was pure, unadulterated panic. I practically threw myself backwards off my chair, scrambling away from the window, heart still trying to beat its way out of my chest. My breath came in ragged gasps. I crab-walked backwards until my back hit the opposite wall, eyes glued to the empty window pane, expecting that face to reappear at any second, maybe shattering the glass this time. The silence in the room was deafening, amplifying the frantic thumping in my ears. Eventually, the adrenaline started to fade, replaced by a shaky exhaustion and a desperate need for confirmation. I needed to see what was outside, or rather, what wasn't outside. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed to peel myself off the wall and approach the window again. My legs felt like lead, my hands were trembling. I moved slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wild animal, half expecting the face to slam back into view. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale, distorted face swimming in the darkness behind my eyelids. I kept the main bedroom light on, screw the electricity bill. I even wedged my desk chair under the doorknob, a completely irrational act considering the threat had been outside the window, not the door, but it made me feel marginally safer. I kept replaying the moment in my head. For 2 days, nothing happened. 2 blessedly normal, uneventful days. I started to relax, really started to convince myself it had been a one-off hallucination, a stress-induced blip. I even started sleeping with the lights off again, though I couldn't quite bring myself to remove the chair from under the doorknob. The memory was still there, lurking at the edges of my thoughts, but it was starting to feel less like a raw wound and more like a fading bruise. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. It was quiet, persistent, like someone testing the glass or trying to get my attention without causing a commotion. My mind flashed back to the pale, pressed face. Was it out there right now, watching me through the gaps in the blinds, waiting for me to look? The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I wanted to pull the covers over my head like a little kid, pretend it wasn't happening, but I couldn't. After what felt like another eternity, the tapping stopped. Just silence. The sudden absence of the sound was almost as jarring as the tapping itself. I stayed frozen, listening intently, my ears straining against the quiet. Was it gone? Had it given up? Or was it just waiting again? Slowly, painstakingly slowly, I forced myself to turn my head towards the window. My neck muscles screamed in protest. The next day, I was a wreck, sleep-deprived, paranoid, jumping at every little noise. The memory of the tapping echoed in my ears. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't think straight. My carefully constructed denial was completely gone, replaced by a certainty that something was terribly wrong. I spent the morning pacing the house, checking locks, peering out windows. From the outside, my house looked completely normal. That night, knowing the camera was out there, watching, brought a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Part of me desperately hoped it would capture something, anything, that would provide an explanation, even a terrifying one. Another part prayed it would record nothing, proving I was just losing my mind. I kept the app connected to the camera open on my phone, placing it on the nightstand beside my bed. Seeing that blur on the camera feed, even if it was indistinct, changed everything. The last vestiges of hoping I was imagining things evaporated completely. Now it wasn't just about fear. It was about a tangible, albeit unknown, presence. Sleep was impossible now. I sat up in bed, phone clutched in my hand, refreshing the live feed obsessively. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Nothing. No more alerts, no sounds, just the oppressive silence of the night. The next few nights followed a similar pattern. No more faces pressed against the glass, no more tapping. But the camera would trigger intermittently, usually between midnight and 3 a.m. Always the same kind of recording, a fleeting blur, a shadow moving too quickly at the edge of the frame, always seeming to drop down or move away just as the recording started. Never a clear image, never enough to identify anything. It was frustrating, nerve-shredding. Then one night it changed. I was doing my usual ritual, sitting in bed, pretending to read, phone open to the camera app beside me. Just after 1 a.m., the motion alert buzzed. I grabbed the phone, expecting the usual fleeting blur. But this time it was different. The recording started, showing the familiar view of the siding and window frame. And then slowly, deliberately, something pale slid into view from the top. It wasn't just a blur, it was a hand. Seeing those fingers tap the glass on the recording broke something in me. The fear was still there, stronger than ever, but now it was mixed with a weird sense of confrontation. It wasn't just some passive observer anymore. It was actively trying to engage. The next night, I didn't pretend to read. I sat on the edge of my bed, facing the window, the blinds pulled fully open, room dimly lit only by the hallway light spilling through the open door. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, locked in a silent standoff. Me, sitting on the edge of my bed, muscles rigid, heart pounding. It hanging there impossibly outside my second-floor window, its pale face pressed against the glass, those dark eyes unwavering. The initial wave of terror began to subside slightly, replaced by a chilling curiosity and a profound sense of the unreal. I started noticing details I hadn't before. Seeing it try to speak, even silently, pushed me past some internal boundary. The fear was still there, a cold weight in my stomach, but now there was also a desperate need to understand, or maybe just to make it stop. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling, never breaking eye contact with the face. I took a step towards the window, then another. The face didn't react, didn't flinch. It just kept watching me, its mouth still slightly open after its silent utterance. That single, soft tap directly in front of me, combined with the unwavering stare, felt intensely personal, deeply invasive. It wasn't just at the window anymore. It felt like it was interacting with me, acknowledging my presence, my question, even if its response was utterly cryptic. My mind raced. What did the tap mean? Was it saying, "Come here"? Was it saying, "Let me in"? Or was it just demonstrating its presence again? The ambiguity was agonizing. After it disappeared that night with that final, horrifying, almost smile, I completely lost it. I backed away from the window, stumbling over my own feet, and collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. The image of that face, those eyes, that smile was seared into my brain. It wasn't just scary anymore. It felt actively malicious, predatory. The playful tapping, the silent mouthing, the final deliberate look, it felt like psychological torture. I didn't sleep at all. I dropped the phone like it was burning hot. It clattered onto the floor, the screen thankfully intact. I stared at it, then scrambled backwards, away from the phone, away from the window, pressing myself into the corner of the room. My mind reeled. It couldn't be, that reflection. It wasn't possible. I hadn't been near the window when it left. I hadn't smiled like that. That terrible, unnatural smile, had I? My memory of the last few minutes felt suddenly fragmented, unreliable. I never went back for the phone. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, the half-packed bag, and I ran. Didn't look back at the house, didn't pause until I was miles away, driving aimlessly, shaking like a leaf. I ended up in a cheap motel room 3 towns over. I haven't been back to my house since. I called my landlord, made up some excuse about a family emergency, asked him to pack up my essential stuff. I don't know if he saw anything unusual. I didn't ask. I don't want to know.